Hey, welcome back. God hates? Absolutely, God hates. You can't have love without hate. And he actually lists in Proverbs 7 specific things that he hates. Here they are. God hates a proud look, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked plans, feet that are swift in running to evil, a false witness who speaks lies, and one who sows discord among his brethren. The passage begins with, "There are 6 things the Lord hates, yes, 7 that are an abomination to him." And if you paid attention to the 7, 2 repeat. I should say there's one that repeats and makes 2. I'll read them again. A proud look, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked plans, feet that are swift in running to evil, a false witness who speaks lies, and one who sows discord among his brethren. These things God hates. And it was lying, by the way, if you didn't catch it. If you think about it, love must hate. You say, well, what do you mean by that? Well, if you love someone and someone hurts that person, you're going to hate that happened. You're going to hate that they did that. Love must hate. And if you look at the list of things that God says he hates, all of them have implications of people getting hurt because of those actions. God doesn't want people getting hurt because God loves people. Years ago, a good friend of mine sang a song that really intrigued me. And the title of the song is, "There Are Some Things That God Doesn't Know." And when you first hear the title, you're like, no, of course, there's nothing God doesn't know. But when you hear the lyrics, you suddenly realize, oh yeah, there are things God doesn't know. God doesn't know a sinner he can't love. God doesn't know a heart that he can't mend. There are things that God doesn't know. Last video we talked about perspectives, and we're going to continue on that journey. You think, well, this is a weird place to start. God hates. Well, that's one of the aspects of God. And if we're not willing to dig into and consider aspects of God that at first seem that we want to back away from, like God hates, God's jealous, yeah, he is. God has all these characteristics that, if properly understood, make perfect sense. But to properly understand them requires time and effort and consideration and moving from the place where you're looking from to look from a different angle and then a different angle. And as humans, we tend to not want to do that. We're comfortable where we are. Where we are makes sense to us, and so we stay there. What I want to talk about today that goes even a step further than our own comfort and our own perspective is the fact that, one, we tend to surround ourselves with like-minded people, which only increases the narrow view that we have. And number 2, and this one is huge, in the world in which we live, the internet, media, social media, all of it is actually designed to feed you more of what you've already looked for and consumed. So, for example, if you are into sports, the internet will feed you more. If you are into a specific political view, the internet will feed you more. And because you keep getting more and more of the same, it's strengthening in you that perspective. So if you love a particular team, I like the Washington Nationals, and they feed you more and more about the Washington Nationals, your connection to that team and your connection to that sport builds. If you have a specific political view and you keep reading articles from that perspective, you eventually come to the place where you're like, man, this is the only way to see it. But that's fundamentally not true. There are a myriad of ways to look at anything. And if we're going to be honest, we need to make the effort to intentionally move around the circle and look from other perspectives. We have to. If we don't, we will stay where we are, and our picture of God will be very narrow, or we may not ever consider believing in God at all, because maybe we started with the perspective that he doesn't exist, and if we don't actually move from that perspective, we'll never even consider the possibility that he exists. Or we're convinced that he's judgmental and vindictive, so we want nothing to do with him. Or. So unless we take the disciplined step of intentionally looking from other perspectives that are not our own, we won't grow. And if we don't grow, we're robbing ourselves of the opportunity of seeing God more specifically, more clearly, more accurately, more fully. Because God isn't just a God who hates. He's a God who loves. He isn't just a God who loves. He's a God of judgment. He isn't just a God of judgment. He's a God of mercy. And he's many, many more things. And as we go on, not in this video, but as we continue on further videos, you're going to see that the statement, God is love, you see the sign on my wall. I've been blogging consistently every day for over 8 years now. The theme of my blogs is that love wins. And as you continue on this journey of discovering God, you're going to find out that love is actually the all-encompassing word of God's character. And far beyond the cheap use of the word love that is common in our world. Oh, I love these shoes. I love this. I love that. When we talk about God and love, it's an all-encompassing word which includes his hatred, his jealousy, his mercy, his justice, and on and on and on. Because love must be just. If there's injustice, there's no love there. But love is also merciful. And how do you be just and merciful at the same time? In some cases, it seems impossible, but God found a way. I shouldn't even say he found a way. He planned from the very beginning that he could be both just and merciful at the same time. And God hates the things that violate love. And he's jealous for the things that build up love. God is a multifaceted, beautiful person. But we don't see that unless we make the effort to look at him from a different perspective than our own. So here's what we really want to get down to today. What makes me who I am? Why do I have the perspective that I hold? And what can I do? Practical things can I do to actually consider looking from another perspective? Well, let me just start with one set of statistics that will open to us the fact that we are deeply impacted by not only where we live, but the age bracket we're in and all sorts of things. This is an age bracket statistic. Back when Canada adopted gay marriage, Paul Martin was the Prime Minister, probably 10, 12 years ago. When that happened, a poll was done to assess Canadians and see how Canadians felt about this. And when the results of that poll came in, they broke down the results by age bracket. So there was 65 and up, and there was 35 and down, and then there was 35 to 65 in the middle. Well, 2/3 of those 65 and up were against gay marriage. 2/3 of those 35 and down were in favor of gay marriage. And the age bracket in the middle, 35 to 65, was split 50-50. Which tells you that even though we think independently, and we think we have our own mind, which we do, but that our mind is impacted hugely by our surroundings, by everything. So The older age bracket was against it. The younger age bracket was for it, majority speaking. And the middle one was split. Meaning, depending on when you were born, had a huge impact on what your opinion was. Which means your opinion was formulated not only from within yourself, but according to your peer group. Most of my peers feel this way, therefore I'm more likely to feel this way. It's not guaranteed, because there were still 1/3 against it in the younger age bracket, and 1/3 for it in the older age bracket. But we are hugely impacted by our surroundings. So, where we were born, the family we were born into, language, ethnicity, color, religion or no religion, and many other factors impact how we see the world. When elections happen, there are some states and some provinces in Canada and some regions within provinces where they really don't even have to have an election. It's known ahead of time how the vote's going to go because that region always votes that way. You say, well, how does that happen? Because once a vast majority of people think alike and then they live in the same place and they move around amongst each other, it's very difficult for that groupthink, that majority opinion, to shift in any other direction because it's always brought back in or reined in by the majority. And even those who grow up in it and think, this is not how I think and this is not what I want to be part of, most of them will end up moving away, which only, again, strengthens those who remain to think the same way going forward. So we have our own mind, which we can use as we choose, but at the same time, there's a tension between the reality that how we end up thinking is hugely impacted by a multiplicity of factors. And here's the thing. Many of those factors we have no say in. We didn't choose where we were born, when we were born, who we were born to, what church we got brought up in or didn't get brought up in any church. No matter how our upbringing was, we didn't choose it. We had no choice over it. It's only as we grow and come into adulthood, teen years and adulthood, that we begin to have the capacity to say, well, how do I think? What's my view of these things? And it's at that point in our lives that we have to start making deliberate choices to determine how we're going to live in this world, how we're going to see this world, how we're going to interact with this world, etc. So the things that we can practically do, number one, and the most important one, we need to intentionally listen and consider points of view that at first we are certain are wrong. You say, well, why would you do that? Why would I waste my time considering a point of view that I know is wrong? Well, because what we know and what is actually true don't always match. And we recognize that when we look at other people. We look at them and their views and we're like, man, I like them, I respect them, but they're wrong. Like if they knew what I knew, they wouldn't hold that view. Well, if we can recognize that other well-meaning people, intelligent people, good people, can hold views that we are pretty sure or maybe very sure are wrong, then wouldn't it behoove us to turn the arrow back on ourselves and realize, well, if they can be wrong, then maybe I can be wrong. Jesus illustrated this with kind of a funny illustration. He says, you're trying to pick a speck out of somebody else's eye, but there's a beam sticking out of your own eye. Like, you can see what's wrong with other people, even little things, but there can be big things wrong with you and you don't get it at all. And the only way to gain a better perspective is to be intentional about it. What does that look like? Well, if you're on the internet is going to start feeding to you. As you use it more and more, it's going to feed to you more and more what they think you want based on what you've looked at before. So if you're looking at an extremely left-leaning view, politically, of some issue, they're going to feed you more of that. Well, deliberately choose to pick a source that's right-leaning and read and see, well, how are these people, how did they get where they are? How are they thinking what they're thinking? I used to teach grade 11, 12 Bible in Nova Scotia. And had a student, when he graduated, he joined a political party. And it seemed to me, based on his upbringing, based on his religious views and all those things, it seemed like an odd choice. Super guy. Smart, funny. Anyways, I messaged him and I said, I'm curious, no judgment. And I was legitimately curious. I'm like, why did you choose that party? Why did you join them? And when he came back with his reasons, I was like, oh, that actually makes sense. There were good qualities about that political party that resonated with him. They were causes that he wanted to fight for, causes that he wanted to see emphasized, causes that he wanted to see brought to the political forefront. And so he joined that party. I would never have known or appreciated why he made that choice if I didn't ask him, or if he wasn't willing and felt safe to tell me. But because I asked and because he felt safe to tell me, now I know and it makes perfect sense. Would I choose that party myself? Not today. I'm not really loyal to any party. I'm more of an issue guy and current events guy than I am tying myself to any particular party. But again, that's me. If we want to understand each other, and if we want to understand God, we need to be willing to make the intentional effort to move around the circle and look from other points of view. Because here, our default, if we don't make that effort, is not only to stay where we are, but to surround ourselves with people who think like us, which will only strengthen us into a point of view that in the end may be our undoing. I'm going to leave you with this thought. When Jesus was here, many religious, well-meaning people turned against him and in the end cried, "Crucify him," because they were unwilling to consider the point of view that Jesus was coming from. It takes effort, it can be frightening, but if we don't do it, the cost could be very, very high. We'll see you next time.